I feel like I'm quite possibly going to regret this, but I feel like this look needs a bolder lip. So I'm gonna try the Zesty Bestie lip stain from Fenty. Because I wasn't wanting to go totally red. Am I gonna regret this? Maybe not. I did already have down the, why do I always feel like I have to talk when I'm putting lip product on? I did already have Lawless Forget the Filler on my lips, so it's feeling like it's layering a little odd on top of that, but we're gonna roll with this. I feel like the leopard print needed something bold on the lips. Today's video is, you know, neutral with a bit of bold. Today I'm super excited because we are gonna be filming a video about my top 10 eyeshadow palettes. It's really more than 10 because I love my eyeshadow palette so much. There's like, it's not even like I snuck in like one palette. Like there's definitely more than 10 palettes in here. But my top 10 neutral eyeshadow palettes in my collection with a twist. So I recently posted a review on the newest Adept Cosmetics palette, the Flying Fiddles palette. And I kept saying in that video, this is like a neutral palette with a twist. And I was like, you know what? There's other neutral palettes with a twist in my collection that I really like, so why not talk about my favorites? And that is what we are going to be doing today. Again, I have a few more than 10, but for the sake of this being in my top 10 series, we're gonna say top 10, and I have like sneaky ways that I snuck more in. But if you guys are interested in hearing about my top 10 neutral palettes with a twist, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project panning content, talking about palettes, talking about makeup, we do it all here, and I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. Other than that, let's jump into the video. Okay, you guys, pause the video. Let me know 3 eyeshadow palettes that you think I am going to mention today. I recently posted my top 15 favorite palettes in my collection, and I had so much fun reading your guys' guesses for my favorites. So I want you to guess 3 eyeshadow palettes that you think I'm gonna mention in today's video. Spoiler, I did just mention the Adept, the newest Adept, so like that'd be an easy guess. Anyway, ignore this mark on my head. It's stained hair dye that I literally cannot get off. The way that I'm sneaking extra palettes in is I have 2 honorable mention palettes that you can no longer get. The rest of the palettes that I'm talking about today, I believe, are still available for sale. So the first palette that came to mind was the Natasha Denona Gold palette. And this is really, I feel like, my first experience with a neutral palette with a twist. And this palette, I feel like I can credit to me starting to fall in love with green eyeshadow, wanting to play around a little bit more with colorful shades other than just like mauves and browns. So this essentially has every neutral, warm leaning brown matte shade a girl could ask for. Like, I love the 5 matte browns in this palette, but then you have these really beautiful pops of blue, you have some pops of gold, and you have these green shades. I absolutely love these 2 shades right here. I love this gold glitter topper, and I even love this like golden, more chunky textured shade as well. I just feel like you can reach into this palette, and yes, you can do just like a brown eyeshadow look. You can do a very plain, I don't want to say boring, but like a very plain brown neutral look. But you can really spice it up with this palette as well, whether you want to go the blue route, the green route, blue and green, take your pick. But this is the first palette that came to mind. And another way I'm sneaking a palette in is, I also wanted to just say, because you can't get this palette anymore, there is always the Natasha Denona Yucca palette, which kind of is like a neutral palette with a twist, but also is just kind of colorful. But I'm not saying these are like dupes by any means, but if you know, are sad that you missed out on the gold and you want something with like the green vibes, there's always the Natasha Denona Yucca palette, a very, very beautiful palette as well. And then the second palette that I wanted to mention that you can't get anymore is the Colourpop Lemonciello palette. This is such a fun little palette. Again, you have some neutral everyday shades, you've got some browns, you have a little bit of like a red here, but then you have some fun pops in the blue, in the yellow, and the shimmers as well. You have a shimmery or a metallic green, you have a metallic yellow, which is so fun. You have this kind of like, I don't want to say it's like a green brown satin sort of shade, but like it kind of is. Definitely a neutral palette with a fun pop and a fun twist. So I wanted to mention that as well. Okay, so then getting into the true top 10. And if you thought I only had 10 more palettes left to mention, you're severely mistaken because we have, again, even more than 10. So let's start with the ones that like we're grouping. So I have 2 from Pat McGrath. And really a lot of the Pat McGrath palettes in general, I feel like you could classify as neutral palettes with a twist. First up, I have the Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction palette. Again, another palette that I felt comfortable with because it had the browns, the brown matte shades, which always just, I find a comfort in a brown matte. But then you have these really fun pops. You have a red, you have like a green, white base, metallic, sparkly, shimmery glitter lid topper. And then you have the green, which is, again, one of the shades that I feel like really made me fall in love with green eyeshadow. In fact, I kind of want to put, do I want to just add, yep, we're going to add a little to the look today. It's truly just such a beautiful palette. And again, you've got like these 6 shades, which really run very neutral. And then you have your quad of like fun pops, which I, again, kind of feel like goes hand in hand with just about every single Pat McGrath palettes. Most of them are more like rosy neutral. And then the other one that I wanted to mention was the Pat McGrath Moonlit Seduction, which I feel like falls even more under the category of like neutral, just because I really think of like these shimmer shades as like neutral shimmer shades. You have like a champagne, a gold, kind of like your standard shades, but these are such a fun twist because they are so like flaky and metallic on the eyes. Absolutely beautiful. We have a fun blue brown shade if you want to like spice it up with that sort of a pop. We have this really beautiful silvery white based metallic, but like also with like a hint of like just the slightest bit of a blue. Such a fun palette as well. Definitely a neutral with a twist. Also, the What's Up Beauty palettes, I feel like are both could be classified as neutral with a twist. So I couldn't decide. So I'm lotting them into one slot, but talking about them both. I have the What's Up Beauty Geodes palette. I probably could have also lotted in the Monsoon palette, but as you can tell, the mattes in the shade for the most part really are more like neutral leaning shades. Yes, they're maybe on like the rosy side, or we have a matte kind of like army green, muted army green sort of shade. We have a pop of yellow for the mattes, but then you really do have these fun kind of duochrome shimmers that really can just spice up an eye look. So I think this one's beautiful. And then we also have the Dragon's Eye palette, which again, kind of more like purple rosy leaning for like that neutral kind of side of things, but more, I don't want to say muted mattes, but definitely more, not like super punchy mattes, not super vibrant and colorful. Especially on the eyes, I feel like this formula is a little bit more buildable when it comes to the mattes. But then you whoa, you have so many fun shimmers and duochromes and metallics. I'm looking at the shade Fly and I'm like, okay, I need to reach for this more frequently. It is like one of those like ethereal pinky blue sort of shades that I just absolutely love. So this palette also came to mind. And then the last slot that I have multiple palettes to mention is Rowan, and really all of the Rowan quads in my opinion are neutrals with a twist. So we have kind of like neutral cool tone pinks, but what makes Rowan like the with a twist, what makes it fall into with a twist for me is it is a cream eyeshadow formula. They're really textured on the eyes. They really pack a punch, and it's not just gonna be like a cool tone pink on your eyes. They are just so beautiful. Again, not gonna be for everybody, but I love the Rowan quads. So here we have 75 Degrees, which is more of like a warm toned, like you have a bronze, you have like a copper, more of like a champagne sort of gold, and then kind of like a satin taupey sort of shade. Oh, I need to reach for this more. And then finally we have Mood Forever, which is my newest to my collection, but I have been nonstop reaching for this. I absolutely love, honestly, like these 3 shades. I could take or leave. I could actually just leave this shade right here, but every other shade within this quad I absolutely adore. So definitely the Rowan quads I had to mention. And then I have a stack of indie palettes because I feel like indies really do neutral with a twist so well, because oftentimes they have some really fun shades mixed in with their palettes. So I have 2 palettes from Nomad Cosmetics to mention. Up first, we match. I have the Okavango Safari palette right here. This is what this one looks like. You have your warm brown mattes. So again, any sort of like brown matte I feel like is just making me feel comfort. But then you have these like pops of green, kind of like dirty, poopy sort of green, some fun like deeper brown shades as well. Definitely a fun twist. I mean, you even have like, you have a zebra shade, like you have like some fun like marbled shades in here as well. Definitely a fun palette. And then the other palette is the Ghosttown palette. Can we catch the, just the packaging is awesome. So this, again, kind of like, and then when I think of like blue neutrals, like for the most part, this is like kind of like the shade of blue I'm kind of thinking of. Not something like, not a cobalt blue, but more of like a, I don't even want to say muted, because this is like a pretty deep navy. Then you have some more, again, I don't want to say muted, but like neutral greens, if we're gonna call it green and neutral. And then just some absolutely beautiful shimmer shades. A lot of the metallic shades throughout this palette are kind of that like creamy sort of formula that really pack a metallic punch on the eyes and is just absolutely stunning as well. I'm distracted by the train. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can hear it. We may as well just mention the palette that kind of like inspired this video. It is the Adept Cosmetics Flying Fiddles palette. Beautiful grungy neutrals, and for me the neutrals in this palette are really the brown here and then some of the like metallic shades, but they're so punchy on the eyes I don't want you to think of like a boring neutral. But like Honey Splurge is such a beautiful sparkly champagne. Also Yellow Brownin is this really beautiful, almost like pale yellow blue green sort of shift. It's absolutely stunning. Daffodil is a really beautiful kind of like yellow to green sort of shift. There's so many fun shifty shades within this palette, but also definitely can be used as a neutral everyday palette. I've used this palette to create wear to work looks. Love this. And you guys know how much I have fallen in love with the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. I feel like this is like the most fitting palette. Nearly Natural. Natural with a pop. This, the mattes, absolute and pure perfection. I've said so many times on my channel that these mattes are more buildable, which I definitely prefer because I am someone who struggles to blend. I have hooded eyes. My eyes like don't like, they're not symmetrical, I feel like, in terms of like the actual shape of my eyes. So we just have a lot going on. And you know, if a matte shade is a little bit more buildable, that typically tends to work better for me. It is truly the metallics in this palette that steal the show. They are some of the most punchy, molten, metallic, sparkly, beautiful shades I feel like I have ever used, and I just love them so much. So definitely a neutral palette with a twist here. Another palette from Adept that I thought of is the Adept Minka palette, and really there's only 2 matte shades within this eyeshadow palette, and the mattes are not what I would consider to be neutral shades. But when I think of like neutral metallics or neutral shimmers, the top row here are really what I think of. But what makes this palette so special and so unique is pretty much every single metallic shade in this palette is that like creamy formula that feels textured. Kind of reminds me a bit of the Rowan quads, but even slightly more textured, and just the most metallic thing I feel like you will ever see on your eye. Really beautiful palette. I feel like this is like the perfect, like you're going out, maybe it's your bachelorette party, maybe it's like your 21st birthday, maybe it's like you're celebrating like your 30th, 40th, 50th birthday, maybe it's New Year's Eve. I feel like this is like a special occasion sort of palette because it is so punchy on the eye, but that's not to say you can't wear it in your everyday life either. Okay, then I have the Cold Moon palette from Ensley Rain, and these matte shades aren't necessarily like, they're not like natural brown, neutral brown shades, but when I think of neutrals, I also kind of think of just more muted, like desaturated colors, and that's really what I feel like I'm getting from these mattes. But the twist in this palette is obviously all of the special shades. There's so many different textures and formulas throughout this eyeshadow palette, and this is a really easy palette to work with and create like a quick look and you're out the door, but you have the most like sparkly look on your eyes because you can really just go in with like 1 or 2 mattes and then pop one of the special shades on your lids, and it is absolutely stunning. So I definitely think this falls into at least my category of neutrals with a twist. And then to end the video, I have the Unearthly Cosmetics Sorcerous Smoke palette. This is such a beautiful palette, and really when I look into this, most of the mattes kind of fit that like neutral vibe for me. I feel like the shade Prophecy is like a little bit warmer maybe than I would think of like a neutral warm brown, but that's kind of a really fun sort of pop. And with Unearthly, their shimmer metallic special formula duochromes are just truly something so special, and that is where I feel like the neutral with a twist comes in. I absolutely love the shade Sorcerous. It looks kind of just like a pinky champagne sort of shade, but it is so impactful on the eyes. Also really beautiful as an inner corner highlight. The shade Transfix is such a beautiful like tealy blue green. You guys know I've fallen in love with blue eyeshadow. Like a tealy blue, like mostly blue with just like a hint of green. It's like merging my two favorite eyeshadow colors together, blue and green. Like you really cannot get better than that. And I also love the matte greens in this palette. I just feel like they're kind of unlike anything else I have in my collection. They're a little bit unique. Like I feel like some people would look at this and say, Steph, you definitely have those shades in your collection. I feel like they're definitely a little bit unique. And I even love the shade Vervin for like an outer third of the lid, just because it has a really beautiful kind of like brown to green sort of shift. I don't know how to explain it. This is such a beautiful palette. And I didn't realize this until Karen Harris mentioned this, but obviously you can do whatever you want with an eyeshadow palette, but you can follow these like quads. And I'm like, when I think of the palettes now in terms of the quads, I'm like, that's just so easy to look in. I have my look ready. It's gonna look beautiful. And I just wanted to point that out. But Sorcerous Smoke, definitely one of the top palettes I feel like with a twist. But after that, you guys, those are the top 10. Really, I think we talked about closer to like 15 to 18 eyeshadow palettes in this collection. Top neutral palettes in my collection with a twist. Everything that is still available will be linked in my description box down below in case you're interested in checking any of these palettes out. That is going to wrap it up for today's video though. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any other neutral palettes you can think of with a twist, we would love to chat about it in the comments down below. Other than that, thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting me and my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.